welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about every single book that I read in 2024. This is going to be my 2024 yearly reading wrap up. I've got all the books sitting here next to me, but before we do that I want to actually go through some reading stats for the year of 2024. So I'm currently filming on my phone, so I just got my laptop here and I've got my Goodreads open, so this is where I'm going to get all the information from today for this video. So in 2024, I read a total of 29 books. Now, I did set myself a goal of 40 books to read. However, obviously, I did not hit that number. I honestly feel like I was in a reading slump for a lot of 2024, and while I did have some good reads, I didn't have a lot of amazing reads. And yeah, I just didn't read as much as I normally do. And I'm hoping that in 2025 I can read a lot more. So I've set myself a goal of 40 books again, and hopefully this time I get to it. Throughout those 29 books, I read a total of 12,464 pages. The shortest book I read was 207 pages, and the longest book I read was 757 pages. My average book length was 429 pages. And my average rating for 2024 is 4.1 stars. Now, I feel like this is a little bit inaccurate just because I'm getting this information from Goodreads, and Goodreads doesn't let you do half stars or quarter stars, and I rate a lot of my books with half stars or quarter stars, so this is a rough average rating. Okay, now let's get into the wrap up and talking about all the books. Okay, so first up we have the first book that I read in 2024, which was none other than Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Now, this book I have very mixed feelings on. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars. Now, Fourth Wing, which is the first book in this series, I love that book. That was one of my favorite books of 2023. I still think about it to this day. I love it so much. So I was so excited to go into Fourth Wing and just see more from these characters, see where the story went, and like this is a thick book. So I was very excited to get all this content from one of my favorite worlds and series. However, I do have to say, and I feel like a lot of people have the same feelings as me, that this book was a little bit of a letdown, and I'm going to tell you why. One of my favorite things about Fourth Wing was how fast-paced it was, firstly. Like, I felt like there was so much happening. Every page we were constantly learning new things about the characters, learning about the world. Like, I did not get bored reading that book. I did not have one moment where I thought, okay, like this can move a bit quicker, like let's wrap it up and move on. I was hooked and addicted and genuinely laughing and crying at my book. I loved it so much. So I went into Iron Flame thinking that it was going to be the exact same because, you know, same author, same series, right? So I went into Iron Flame thinking that it was going to be the same. However, this book, I would say for at least like the first half of the book, was so slow and honestly felt like the biggest info dump. Compared to Fourth Wing with how fast-paced that was and how much was going on and how much I loved it, it was just so slow in comparison. And it took me a long time to get into it. I remember this came out in November of 2023, and obviously I started it then, and obviously I didn't finish it until January of 2024 because it was just so slow and I could not get into it, and it just took me forever to read. But then, that being said, the second half of the book was, oh my god, amazing. The pace really picked up. It was getting so much more intense. There was so much more happening, and the ending, if anyone has read this book, you know that the ending is insane. And oh my god, having to wait over a year for the next book, which is now coming out in a few weeks. I don't think I'm ready, but it was a massive cliffhanger. So like I said, very mixed feelings on this book. Like the first half was really slow, didn't like it that much. I really felt like it dragged on, but then the second half, I loved it, and the ending kind of made up for everything because it left me shocked and wanting to read the next book. The next book that I read in 2024 was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I can't believe I had never read this before. Obviously, I've seen the movies and I've seen them a million times, but never read the books. The Hunger Games was on my list of series that I wanted to read in 2024. I was really wanting to get to it. I gave this book a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, which I knew I would because obviously I love the movies so much already. But I just wanted to see like the differences between the book and the movie, and I feel like in this we got so much more backstory and so much information specifically about like the districts and how everything works and what each district is for, because like each district has their own thing that they're kind of like in charge of. that they do for the Capitol, and I feel like that's not really explained much in the movies. I also loved getting to see Katniss's inner monologue and all her thoughts and everything. It was just a really fun read, and honestly I really wish I read this sooner. I feel like if this was something that I read when I was in high school, I would have ate it up. Like, this is exactly the kind of book that I would have loved back then. Straight after that, I read Catching Fire, which is the sequel to The Hunger Games, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. Out of all the movies, Catching Fire is my favorite one. I love that movie so much, so I was really excited to read this. However, I felt like the movie was a lot better than the book in this situation, which rarely happens. I always feel like when there's a book to movie adaptation or a book to series adaptation, the book is usually better. So I was expecting to love this and eat it up, and I did eat it up. I did like it, but yeah, like I said, I just liked the movie better. I felt like the movie was a lot more fast-paced, whereas this took a little bit to get into it. Like, majority of the book is them like preparing for the games before they go into it. But yeah, overall still really enjoyed this. Next, I read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This is a really different read for me. I don't usually read a lot of romance, but I don't know, I was just in the mood for this at the start of the year, so I picked it up and I ended up really liking it. I gave this one a 4 stars, and I also did start annotating it because there was just some really cute quotes and things, and also some like relatable quotes in there as well. This was my first sports romance that I read, and honestly, I think I'm hooked on sports romances now. I would really love to read more, and especially more hockey romances. But yeah, for me, this book was like the perfect little palate cleanser after all the fantasy and dystopian that I'd read. And yeah, it was just like a quick, fun, silly little goofy time. But the one criticism I do have is that this is way too long. This book is almost 500 pages, I believe. My bad, it's just over 400 pages, but I really think that it could have been narrowed down to maybe even like the 350 mark. Just because I felt like towards the end it started to drag on a little bit, and I was kind of like, okay, like they're together now, I get the point, let's wrap it up. Next up, I read The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if I'm not. This book, I remember, I think I saw it on TikTok somewhere, and I was like, oh my god, this sounds really cute, and added it to my Goodreads TBR, and then just randomly decided to pick it up one day last year. Basically, this book is based on, I believe it's Korean folklore. It's about a girl and her sister, from what I remember, gets captured by a sea monster and taken down under the sea to like that land. Obviously it's a fantasy, and then she goes to save her, and along the way there's a little bit of romance involved, and yeah, I ended up giving this 3 stars. I did like it, but just for me personally it wasn't anything super amazing. I would recommend it, but I probably wouldn't read it again, and I haven't really thought about it since. But it is just a really short, quick, easy, fun little read if you do want something as like a little palate cleanser between a lot of heavy fantasy or something like that. Next up, I read War Hour by Lauren Lossig. I think that's how you pronounce it. I read this book on my Kindle, and this was a fun little YA fantasy. I found this through the author on TikTok. She was making a video promoting her book. And basically the concept of this book is where powers are earned through trials that you have to complete. So there is the deadly trial trope in this book, which is one of my favorite tropes in fantasy books ever. I love when there's trials. Anything with trials, give it to me and I will eat it up. And I just thought that the concept of this was so unique because it's something where the powers are earned, not already existing, which is something that I personally haven't seen in any other fantasy books. Not saying that it hasn't been done, I just haven't read any fantasy books like that. So it was something new to me, and I found it really unique and fun. Because it was YA, it made it a really easy read, and there is a little bit of a romance in there as well. And this was her debut novel, I believe, and the second one comes out sometime this year, which I'm so excited for. I ended up giving it 4.7 stars. The reason that it wasn't a 5-star read for me was because I felt it a little bit predictable. There were some things where I was like, okay, I can see where this is gonna go, and that is where it went. But yeah, overall really enjoyed this, and like I said, can't wait for book 2. I then went on to read The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black. I gave this 4 stars. If you didn't know, this is the second book in the spin-off to the Cruel Prince trilogy. Spin-off is told from the point of view of the main character Jude's little brother Oak, and this is when he's a bit grown up. It's a dual POV series, so it's also told from the perspective, oh my gosh, this is such a tongue twister. It is also told from the perspective of Ren. There we go. And there is also a little bit of a romance going on between them as well. If I'm being completely honest, I do not remember much from this series at all. Like, I remember a lot from The Cruel Prince, but from the spin-off series, the first one I think is The Stolen Heir. The Stolen Heir in this book feels like a fever dream. Like, what even happened? I do not remember, and I also just remember not liking it as much as the original trilogy. However, I did love getting to see little cameos and snippets of Jude and Carden because They're my babies. I love them so much. So yeah, I gave this a 4 stars, but honestly thinking back on it, I feel like it's more of like a 3.5 just because I just never think about the spin-off series and these characters. I don't know. I didn't have as much of a connection to it as I did with the original trilogy. After that, I went on to have my first 5-star read of the year, and that is none other than The Right Move by Liz Tomford. Oh my god, this book and Ryan Shea, this book had me giggling and kicking my feet the entire time. Oh my god, Ryan Shea, the man that he is. If you guys are looking for like the ultimate book boyfriend, look no further. This book is the second book in an interconnected standalone series of sports romances. So I actually started with this book. I haven't read the first one yet, which is called Mile High. Because they're interconnected, you don't have to read them in order. So I jumped straight into this one just because I had heard so much about Ryan Shea and I was like, I need to read about this man. And my friend got me this for my birthday as well, and she's like, you have to read it. So this book follows Ryan, as I've mentioned a million times by now, and also Indy. Ryan is a basketball player, which is what makes this a sports romance. And then genuinely cannot for the life of me remember what Indy does, but she was there too. Even though I don't remember what she does, I cannot for the life of me recommend this more. This is amazing. If you're an acts of service girly, you need to read this book. The things that Ryan Shea does for her, even before they like start dating, he just does all these little things for her that is just like, oh my god. Like, he pays attention and listens. If you want to read about a man like that, Ryan Shea. After that amazing read, I finally started the ACOTAR series. So obviously I started off with the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I was really nervous to go into this, but also really excited because this is a series that I've been putting off for so long. I am a massive fantasy and romantasy reader. That is like the main genres that I read. If you're in the book community at all, you definitely would have heard of this series. It is everywhere. It is a lot of people's favorite series. It is one of the, I guess I want to say basic, I don't know if that's the right word, but like the basic BookTok books that everyone loves. And yeah, I've just been putting it off for so long because I was really nervous to go into it because I was like, what if it doesn't live up to the hype? Because it is really hyped up. Last year, I finally decided to bite the bullet and read the series because I was like, I cannot keep putting it off for any longer. And I gave this first book a 4 stars. I remember the start of this book being really slow. It took me a little bit to get into it, which was a little bit of a red flag for me because I was expecting to go into this and just be hooked from the first page because of how hyped up it is. And I will say I was a little bit disappointed. I'm not saying that it wasn't good because I really enjoyed the end of the book, like the last couple hundred pages specifically. Everything that happened there I really liked. Unfortunately, this book did not live up to the hype for me, but it was still good. I would still recommend it. I would just say don't go in with the expectations that it's amazing. I think if I had read this a lot earlier in my reading journey, I probably would have liked it a lot more. But I think because I went into it after reading so many other fantasies, there's just other things for me that like top that. Please don't come at me. This is just my thoughts and opinions, and I still did like the series. I just don't think it's as amazing as everyone says it is. Right after that, I read A Court of Mist and Fury and I gave this one 4.5 stars. So this one immediately was a lot better than the first. Again, it was a little bit of a slow start, but I didn't mind. I think it picked up pretty quickly. This book is a lot of people's favorites in the series, mainly because of Rhysand or Rhysand, however you want to say it. We definitely get a lot more of him in this book and see their friendship and relationship develop over the course of this book, which I really enjoyed. Was probably my favorite part of this book. Loved that this was such a slow burn and we got to see them form like an actual friendship and learn to trust each other first before anything romantic happened. Like obviously there was a lot of flirting and banter, but they didn't kiss or do anything until at least like I want to say 60% into the book, and that is something that I prefer in a fantasy or romantasy or just any kind of romance. I love a slow burn. I also loved getting to see the Night Court and Valorous and everything. I really liked the world in this book. But again, not a 5 stars just because there was something missing to me. I don't know, maybe again it's just because it was so hyped up and I had such high expectations, but again for me it just wasn't all that, but it was good and I can see why people like it as much as they do. I then decided to take a little break from the ACOTAR series and I read Powerful by Lauren Roberts. This is a novella and it comes after her first book, Powerless. So this was a really quick short read and I'm pretty sure I read it in a couple hours. This book takes place at the same time as Powerless but from a different character's point of view, so we get to see what this character was up to and then get to see from this character what happens at the end, which if you've read Powerless, then you know. If you know, you know. And going into this, obviously I knew that was coming, and did I still sob? Yes. Reading that from a different perspective broke me all over again, and oh my god, Lauren Roberts, the woman that you are. I don't know what she puts into her books, but her books are so addictive and fast-paced and quick, and I just love them. If you haven't read this series yet, highly recommend it. It's, again, Powerless was one of my favorite reads of 2023. So yes, I was very excited to go into this, but it did break me. I don't know if I mentioned, but I gave this 4 stars. Right after I read Powerful, I read Reckless, which is the second book in this series. This had just come out when I read it, and I was so excited. This was one of my most anticipated releases of 2024, and I am happy to say that it did not disappoint. I loved this book. Again, I was giggling and kicking my feet the entire time reading it. One thing I will say about this book, and I think a lot of people noticed this as well, and a lot of people had an issue with this, I didn't mind too much, but the fantasy plot in this was basically non-existent. This definitely focused a lot more on the romance side of the romantasy and focused on the relationship between our two main characters, and it did get a little bit repetitive at times, but like I don't even care. I ate this up. I loved it. I loved the banter, loved everything. I loved that we got more of our characters together. I love that it's dual POV, so we get to see Kai's point of view as well as Hayden's. I just love this book so much. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. The only thing that stopped it from being a 5 stars was because I felt like the ending was like slightly predictable and also a little bit lackluster for me. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a crazy ending and I'm very excited to read the next book, but I just feel like from a fantasy book, I want more from a plot twist and a cliffhanger. And also, like I said, I kind of saw it coming. There were things that were pointing towards it. So yeah, not a 5 stars for me, but very, very close. The next book that I read, I don't have the physical copy for because my boyfriend is still borrowing it and he hasn't given it back, but that was A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J Maas. So this is the 3rd book in the ACOTAR series. I gave this one 3.5 stars. Definitely probably my least favorite out of the series. Actually, no, that's not true. My second least favorite. Definitely didn't like it as much as A Court of Mist and Fury. I just felt like, again, it was just a really slow start. I feel like all of her books so far have had a really slow start. And it takes a little bit to get into it and like for things to start happening. I'm pretty sure I soft DNF'd this book at some point during the year. I picked it up earlier, I think maybe before I started reading Reckless and stuff, and then put it down and then picked it back up later just because, like I said, it was a bit hard for me to get into it. But that being said, the second half of the book I really enjoyed. I love getting to see all the other courts now in this book, like the Summer Court, the Winter Court, all that, and like learn about their politics and learn about their leaders and their kingdoms and stuff like that. I thought that was really fun. But yeah, overall, like I keep saying, just didn't live up to the hype for me. I'm sorry. Next up, I read A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is the novella of the series, or technically book 4, I guess. I gave this 3 stars. This was my least favorite of the series because with novellas, I feel like you have to really be invested in the series to like them more, because novellas don't really give you a lot to the story. I feel like novellas are always more character driven, and because they are so short, it's like you can't really put much into it. So yeah, this was cute. I did like seeing more of the characters. It was kind of like Christmas themed, I think. So that was fun, but yeah, it was nothing special or crazy. So sorry if the angle has slightly changed. My phone was telling me that my storage was full, so I had to go and delete some stuff. Anyway, as I was saying, the next book that I read was A Court of Silver Flames, which is the last book in the ACOTAR series. For now. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I think this one and A Court of Mist and Fury are my favorites. This one was definitely the longest, and I ended up downloading this on my Kindle to read it because sitting here and holding open this book is low-key a workout. It is 750 pages. That is a long book, but I did really like this. I think I finished it in maybe a week or so, or a few days, I can't remember. Yeah, not really too much to say on this book. It did follow a different character's point of view, and I did enjoy getting to see that. I did miss our other character's point of view, Feyre, but I enjoyed this, and I really liked the training arc that was in this book. Training arcs are some of my favorite things to read in fantasy books. I also really liked the like girlhood, female friendship, female empowerment vibe that we got from this book as well. But yeah, that concludes my thoughts on the ACOTAR series. Next, I entered my thriller era and I read a bunch of thrillers on my Kindle. So starting up with 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. I gave this book 5 stars. I really loved this. It was definitely really good for my first thriller. I basically read this in like 2 days. And both days I stayed up like till like 2 a.m. in the morning, even though I had work the next day, because I was just hooked. This book had me hooked. It was really fast paced as well, really easy to read. It was my first Holly Jackson book as well. I really liked her writing style, and I do want to read more of her thrillers this year. I then read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This was, again, another thriller. One of the more popular ones, I feel like, that you see on BookTok and stuff. Yeah, overall, I really liked this book. I think I didn't give it a 5 stars just because I felt like it was a little bit predictable towards the end. Again, same situation with this. I was hooked reading it. I just kept wanting to know more, and I feel like thrillers are really good at doing that. They keep you on the edge of your seat. They keep you wanting to learn more, especially if there's like a mystery involved, because obviously you want to find out what happened. Next, I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This is another thriller, and I also gave this 5 stars. This was a really good reading month for me. I obviously really enjoyed this as well. This was a really cool concept. It's about 2 women, and they find out they have the same birthday. And one of the women, she's like really wealthy and has her own podcast, so she asks the other woman to come on her podcast, and she does a show about her. And then as you're going through, this other woman is revealing things about herself that seem a little bit suspicious. This book was crazy. This book was insane. I loved it. I was literally on the edge of my seat reading it, like tapping through my Kindle so fast because I wanted to know what happened. I then read Want to Know a Secret, also by Frida McFadden, and I gave this one 4 stars. This one I read after hearing a booktuber, Freya, talk about it, and the way she talked about it just seemed really intriguing, and I'm pretty sure I picked it up right after I finished watching her video. And yeah, I did really like this, but it wasn't anything amazing. I wouldn't say I have like thought about it a lot since I read it, but I would definitely recommend it. I then took a break from my Kindle and started The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. This is a YA fantasy, and honestly probably a little bit dystopian as well. It follows a girl named Kiva, and she is in this prison. She's been captured and locked up there since she was very young, and she is the healer of the prison. So basically she gets to heal any of the inmates that may have injuries or get sick, and her job is to also heal any new inmates that come in. So Kiva's family is outside of the prison, and they sneak her in notes in a secret code and telling her that like they're gonna come in, get her out soon, and all that fun stuff. And then one day a prisoner comes in, and there's a note hidden in their robe, and it basically says to Kiva to keep this prisoner alive at all costs. I gave this book 4 stars. I really liked it, especially towards the end. The plot twist at the end and the cliffhanger, did not see that coming at all. I was really shocked, and it made me really excited to continue the series. I then read Lightlark by Alex Aster. This is the start of another fantasy series. This one is set on the island of Lightlark, which reappears every 100 years, and every 100 years there is these trials which all the rulers of the different kingdoms of Lightlark must face in order to break their curses. Each kingdom is in charge of a different thing, so our main character, Isla, her kingdom is in charge of like nature and talking to animals and stuff. There's also like the moon kingdom, the sun, the sky. There's like about 6 different ones, I think, and each of the kingdoms also has a curse placed upon them. But the secret that the main character is hiding is that she is actually powerless, and also means that she is not affected by the curses. So she must find a way to survive these trials without powers, and also not risk her secret being discovered. I really enjoyed this book. I was hooked from the start. I really loved learning about all the different kingdoms and their different powers and all the lore behind the different kingdoms and stuff and the different rulers. This book is also a romantasy, but there is a bit of a love triangle in it, which is usually not my favorite trope, but I didn't mind it too much in this book. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. The only thing that stopped it from being 5 stars was because it was a little bit predictable. There was one thing that I predicted, but everything else, all the other plot twists and stuff, was a shock to me, and my jaw was dropped reading it. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking and I'm making no sense. I really hope that everything I'm saying is making sense. Next, I read Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is the second book to Icebreaker. That series is also a little interconnected standalone series. This book is not a sports romance unlike the other one. This one is set at a, what is it called? What is it actually called? Hello? A summer camp. It is set at a summer camp. I didn't like this one as much as I liked Icebreaker. I think that was mainly because of the setting, because I didn't really care for the summer camp. There was also the jobs of the 2 main characters at this summer camp is to like look after a bunch of these kids and like help them do all these activities and stuff that you would do on a summer camp, and I just did not care for that. I also am not really a fan of kids in books usually. So this one was a 3.5 stars for me. However, I did really like our two main characters and I loved the depth to them, and I loved that they were able to talk to each other and help them figure out their issues and stuff. I also felt like I could relate to the main character a lot, the girl main character. Yeah, I really enjoyed this at the start. As you can see, I started annotating it, but then I just gave up and couldn't be bothered because I don't know, I didn't like it as much. But at the start and the little meet cute, I was like giggling and kicking my feet. I then read The Inmate by Frida McFadden. This is another thriller and I also read this on my Kindle. This one was my least favorite of all the thrillers that I've read. I gave this one 3 stars. I was enjoying reading it, but then the ending and the plot twist just really threw me off. I feel like it didn't make sense to me. It kind of came out of nowhere. It just felt like very random. I don't know, I just didn't really enjoy it, and I spoke to one of my friends who's also read this and she felt the same way as well, so it wasn't just me. Yeah, definitely think this is not one of Frida McFadden's best works, even though I've only read 3 of her books. The other 2 I enjoyed a lot more. I then read Dance of Thieves, and this was the first book that I read for my book club that I'm in with my friends. Actually, technically our first book was Powerless, but I'd already read it and I was planning to reread it and then I just didn't get to it. So this was the first official book that I read for book club. My phone is being annoying and keeps telling me that I'm running out of storage. I literally have 256 gigabytes and iCloud. How can I possibly be running out of storage? Make it make sense. Anyway, as I was saying, I annotated this quite a bit because I wanted to have things to talk about with the girlies at book club. I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. I remember liking this book, but I don't remember why I didn't give it a higher rating. I think from memory, I liked this book, but it wasn't something that I loved or was obsessed with. So yeah, I wish I could give more thoughts on this, but I don't remember them. You would think that I would remember it considering it was for book club and I had a whole discussion with it with my friends, but it's completely left my brain. I don't know why. It wasn't a bad book. I liked it. It was a good book. I would recommend it. I just don't remember my thoughts on it. Next up, I read The Assassin's Blade. So very similar to with ACOTAR, the Throne of Glass series is one that I have put off for so long, and for the exact same reasons as ACOTAR. It is a very loved series. It is a very hyped up series. It is a very well-known series. And yeah, I just kept putting it off. Another reason I kept putting it off is because there's so much talk online on what book you should read first. A lot of people say you should read this book first. A lot of people say you should read it third. Other people think you should read it at a different point in the series, because this book is actually a prequel and it is a little series of 5 novellas, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 5 novellas. And these take place right before the start of the first book, which is Throne of Glass. So I obviously decided to read this one first, and oh my god, let me tell you, that was the best decision that I could have possibly made. And I recommend, if you haven't read this series yet and you're planning to and you're like me and you don't know what book to start with this one. Just trust me and thank me later. I think this book was such a great introduction to the story. It sets up for the story and the characters really, really well. It basically shows how our main character gets to where she is in the start of the first book, and basically then you go into the first book knowing exactly how she ended up there. It adds a lot of context and backstory, and the ending of this book may be really, really bad, but like in a good way, because then that made me really excited to go into the next one. I gave this 4.25 stars. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. It was just like the start that I felt was a little bit slow and took a little bit to get into, but by like I would say the 3rd novella, things started kind of connecting and adding together and then setting up for the ending of this book and the start of the next book. And oh my god, wow. There was one thing that I definitely saw coming. It was a little bit obvious, but like the confirmation in like the last chapter of this book that you get, But yes, highly recommend starting with this if anyone wants to start the Throne of Glass series. Guys, we're almost there. We've got 4 books left to talk about. I feel like I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit, so if you can hear that, I'm very sorry. Next book I picked up was The Gilded Cage by Lynette Noni. This is the sequel to The Prison Healer. I was so excited to read this and I gave this 5 stars. I loved this book so much. This book was amazing. I love the characters in this, specifically one of the side characters, Culloden. He carried the book for me, honestly. I love him so much. I started filming a reading vlog when I was reading this, and it isn't up yet, but I did mention in that book that Culloden gives off the same vibes as Kenji in the Shadow Me series, if anyone has read that. I just remember when I was reading this book, I was hooked. I was turning the pages, I just kept wanting to read more, and it was one of those books that really just sucks you and immerses you into the world and into the pages. Like I literally felt like I stepped into this world. I could see everything so clearly. There's like a little movie playing in my head and it was amazing. I loved it. I highly recommend this series as well to anyone who maybe wants to get into fantasy. The writing is really easy to read and it's YA, so it's not like too complicated or anything. And like I've said, the characters are amazing. You will definitely get attached to them. I then read Throne of Glass. This is obviously technically the first book in the Throne of Glass series, but I read it as the second book and I love this so much. I gave this 5 stars as well, I'm pretty sure. Yep, 5 stars. This book just felt so nostalgic to me. It gave me the same feelings as if I was reading like Harry Potter for the first time. This book is just one of those books that reminds you of why you love reading. I was completely immersed into the world and just reading it so quickly and really wanting to know what happened next. I really love our main character, Selena, and I think the Assassin's Blade really set up her character well for this book. Yeah, I'm so excited to continue the rest of the series. I just know already that this series is going to be one that sticks with me for a long time and it's going to become one of my favorite 5-star, 6-star, Infinity Star series and reads. Second last book of the year was Spectacular by Stephanie Garber. This is a novella that comes after the Caraval series. It's a little Christmas novella. Now with the Caraval series, I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as Once Upon a Broken Heart. I loved that trilogy so much. But I was still excited to read this little novella, especially around the holiday time. Also, this book has like these gorgeous illustrations all throughout it. I don't know if this is gonna be spoilers, but it just has these beautiful illustrations. This whole book is beautiful. However, this was a really big disappointment for me. I really didn't like this book much at all. I gave it a 2.75 stars, which is my lowest rated book that I read last year. It started out okay, like it was pretty cute and fun, and then about like halfway through, it took a really weird turn and it made me uncomfy, and I'm not gonna lie, it was giving me a little bit of like rapey vibes. So yeah, this book honestly just felt really confusing to me because if you look at the Caraval series, it's so whimsical and fun and beautiful and magical, and then you get this and it just takes a completely different turn to that, which I don't know if this is Stephanie Garber saying that she wants to get into a different genre or like write maybe different kinds of books, because the Caraval series is all YA and the Once Upon a Broken Heart series and everything is all YA, so maybe she's wanting to step into new adult or something like that, and that is completely fine. I'm all for that, but it just felt really weird to randomly throw what happened in the second half of this book into this series. It just felt really random and weird, and like I said, it made me uncomfortable. I did not like it at all. I am going to keep this though because it is stunning and I want it on my shelves with the rest of my Stephanie Garber collection. And lucky last book of the year was Nightbane by Alex Astor. This is the sequel to Lightlark and I loved this. I really enjoyed this. I ate this up. I did start listening to this on audiobook, so I listened to it half on audiobook and then also half reading, so I like was switching back and forth between the two. Now, as much as I love this, I will say it took me a little bit to get into it, and I think that's why I ended up switching to the audiobook. I don't know why, I just didn't love it the first few chapters, but then it started getting into it and I really liked it. I specifically loved from this book the flashback scenes and getting to see what happened before the events of the first book and everything that led up to that, and the little romance that we got in that part of the book. I loved that, and I will say this book turned me into a grim girly, because when I read Lightlark I was an horror girly, but this book turned me into a grim girly, and I'm really hoping that in the next book they end up as Endgame, otherwise I will be very upset. I think this was a really good read to end off the year with. I gave it 4.5 stars. So those were all the books that I read in 2024. Like I said earlier, it's not my best reading year and I didn't have as many 5 stars as I would have liked, but that is okay, and 29 books is also still such a good number of books to get to. I'm really hoping that this year in 2025 I can have a better reading year and have a lot more books that I love. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them, and also let me know what your favorite books of 2024 were. If I had to pick a favorite read of the year, it would probably be Throne of Glass, just because, like I said before, that book felt so nostalgic. It reminded me why I loved reading again, and it was just such a good book, and like I said, I feel like I can tell already that that series is going to stick with me forever. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!